All right, we will get started. Just a quick note that we're recording this meeting and we'll post a link on our meetings and workshops webpage. Before we review today's agenda, I have a brief reminder that we are offering language translation services. Even though we are hosting this in English, you have an option to listen in Spanish. To do so, just select your preferred language under the interpretation menu and click Mute Original Audio to only hear in Spanish. We're going to pause for a bit as we move interpreters into the Spanish room.
Antes de comenzar, solo quiero recordarles a todos que si prefieren participar hoy en español, al fondo de la pantalla seleccionen More, o sea, más. Después deben seleccionar Interpretation y seleccionar Español. Gracias.
Just a few quick reminders about participating in today's meeting. If you can, we ask that your name displays your first name, last name, and affiliation. The instructions are on the slide. We'll pause for a few seconds in case anyone needs a second to make updates. During discussions, we will start with raised hands. To raise your hand, press Reactions and the Raise Hand button. Stay on mute unless called on. For those calling in, you can press #6 to unmute once we call on you. If you call in, you can raise your hand on the phone by pressing #2. Welcome and thank you all for joining our workshop discussing transport refrigeration units, or as we call them, TRUs. My name is Maria Osorio. I will be one of your presenters today. Also with us today is Celeste Galvin from our program implementation team, Liz Mazmanian from our inventory team, who you will meet later, and Lorenzo Bustos, who will help moderate our discussions. And we also have the rest of the TRU program and inventory team on the line. Today's workshop is split into two main parts. This first part is an update on TRU program activities, including the implementation of the 2022 TRU Airborne Toxic Control Measure, ATCM, amendments and an update on the next TRU rulemaking that we continue to call TRU Part 2. After program updates, we'll have some time set aside for your questions or comments. And then the second half of the workshop is to discuss the baseline inventory for TRUs and will be presented by Liz. After her presentation, we will have another chance for discussion to take your questions and comments about the inventory. If needed, and if there is time, we can also try to circle back to questions and comments on program activities. The chat is turned off, but you can still submit written questions and comments using the Q&A. I will now pass this to Celeste to share some updates on the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, my name is Celeste Galvin, and I will be discussing the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments. Adopted in 2004, the TRU ATCM is a regulation focused on reducing emissions from transport refrigeration units, commonly referred to as TRUs. Since its adoption, the TRU ATCM has been amended in 2010, 2011, and most recently in 2022, which we will discuss today. The board adopted the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments on February 24th. It was approved by the Office of Administrative Law on July 18th and became effective on October 1st. The next two slides summarize the key elements that are included in the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments. Beginning December 31st, 2022, model year 2023 and newer trailer TRUs, domestic shipping container TRUs, railcar TRUs, and TRU generator set engines must meet a particulate matter emission standard of 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour or lower. The regulation also requires model year 2023 and newer truck TRUs, trailer TRUs, and domestic shipping container TRUs to use a refrigerant with a global warming potential of 2,200 or less, or uses no refrigerant at all. Beginning December 31st, 2023, the regulation requires TRU owners and owner-operators to report to CARB all TRUs operating in California regardless of whether they are based in-state or out-of-state. There are also registration and reporting requirements for applicable facilities. Applicable facilities, which are defined as a refrigerated warehouse or distribution center with a building size greater than or equal to 20,000 square feet, a grocery store with a building size greater than or equal to 15,000 square feet, a seaport facility, or an intermodal rail yard with TRU activity must register with CARB. On a quarterly basis, they must either report to CARB all TRU activity in their facility or provide a declaration of TRU compliance, stating that non-compliant TRUs subject to the TRU ATCM are not permitted to operate inside the facility fence line or property boundary. Fee requirements for TRUs operating in California and applicable facilities were also included in the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments. However, on December 4th, 2023, a California trial court prohibited CARB from collecting the included fees at this time. The amendments also include a CARB-issued compliance label requirement in which TRU owners and owner-operators must affix compliance labels to all TRUs operating in California. This requirement supersedes the ARB IDN labeling requirement. The regulation also includes a zero-emission truck TRU fleet requirement that requires TRU owners to turn over 15% of their diesel-fueled truck TRU fleet to zero emission each year. However, the U.S. EPA did not act on the zero-emission truck TRU fleet requirement. We will discuss what this means for implementation in the next few slides. As mentioned, on January 3rd, 2025, the U.S. EPA waived federal preemption for portions of CARB's TRU regulation, but did not act on the ZE TRU requirements. Now we are going to discuss what this means for original equipment manufacturers and California dealers. Original equipment manufacturers may manufacture new diesel-fueled truck TRUs for sale or use in California that are otherwise compliant with the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments. Dealers in California may sell newly manufactured diesel-fueled truck TRUs that are otherwise compliant with the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments. What does a withdrawal of the zero-emission truck TRU fleet requirement mean for truck TRU owners and owner-operators? Owners and owner-operators are not required to turn over their diesel-fueled truck TRU fleet to zero-emission truck TRUs. They may purchase newly manufactured diesel-fueled truck TRUs from California dealers that are otherwise compliant with the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments. Truck TRUs manufactured after December 31st, 2022 must use a refrigerant with a global warming potential less than or equal to 2200 or use no refrigerant at all. The reporting and labeling requirements outlined in the TRU ATCM must also be met. To summarize what I've covered here today regarding the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments, I would like to highlight a few important points. Truck TRU owners and owner-operators are not required to purchase zero-emission truck TRUs at this time and are still able to use their diesel-fueled truck TRUs. Engine model year 2014 and older truck TRU engines were required to comply with the ultra-low emission in-use performance standard, also known as TRU, 7 years after the engine model year. Engine model year 2015 and newer TRUs are not currently subject to an in-use standard, meaning there is not a specific date at which the unit becomes non-compliant until subject to a more stringent standard. They may also purchase newly manufactured diesel-fueled truck TRUs until more stringent requirements are adopted. It is important to note that all diesel-fueled truck TRUs must be otherwise compliant with the TRU ATCM requirements. Lastly, TRU owners and owner-operators are not required to pay TRU operating fees at this time. Additional information and frequently asked questions can be found on our TRU program page. CARB will continue to implement the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments as summarized in slides 8 and 9. We will continue to work closely with stakeholders throughout the process and will provide any updates on the TRU program page. You can find the program link in the resources section of this presentation. We encourage TRU owners and owner-operators to purchase the cleanest technology available when turning over or adding to their TRU fleet. If you have any questions or comments on the 2022 TRU ATCM amendments, we encourage you to contact the Arbor helpline via email at arbor@arb.ca.gov or call us at 888-878-2826.
Thank you, Celeste. So we are now at our first discussion session that will be focused on the implementation update that Celeste presented. If you have questions or comments on either the next rulemaking or inventory, please save them for the next discussion sessions coming later in today's workshop. We will start with verbal comments and questions on Zoom, then any on the phone, and then we'll move on to any that we receive in the Q&A. If you can, please state your name and affiliation first when speaking. And as a reminder, if you're on the phone, you can raise your hand using #2. I see one hand raised. Mike, I will ask you to unmute, then you can ask your question or make your comment.
Hi guys, Mike Macias with TCI. I just wanted to clarify. I'm not sure if I heard it correctly. In terms of fees that need to get paid, are we still paying a registration fee? Is that what I heard, or is that going away? That wasn't too clear for me.
Thanks, Mike, for the question. Celeste or Teresa, could you respond, please?
So there are no fees due at this time.
Okay, and then we still have to we still continue the new Arbor decal procedure, correct? Or is that going away? Or are we reverting back to, just spraying on, or just somehow adhering a, a number to the TRU unit? How is that, or what is that reverting to?
So just to clarify, your previous question about the fees, let me just be more specific. That is for TRU specifically. Just wanted to word it a little bit better. Other fees for like trucks, things like that, etc., may still apply. As far as the labels, so we did recently receive a purchase order for more labels, and we are resuming distribution for that. So for any of your units that you have not, or I'm sorry, any of your compliant TRUs that you have not received labels for, you can always reach out to us at that Arbor helpline that I provided or the email. And the TRU labels do supersede the previous labeling requirement that we had.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I'm not seeing any more raised hands. So I think we can move on to the Q&A. Let's see. Okay, one question in the Q&A from Michael. Are you planning to give any future waivers / exemptions for fleets who did invest in alternative truck TRUs? Um, Alyssa, can you respond to that question?
Yeah, sure. Hi. So at this point, we're still working on developing concepts and what the next rule will look like, including waivers and if fleets have already adopted hybrids, how we will treat those. So once we have an update, we'll share. And just, I guess, we'll get into it in the next presentation, but we are still kind of developing that timeline. So we don't have a date yet for when we will have updates, but stay tuned.
Thanks, Alyssa. Another question in Q&A from Catherine. What is the green global warming sticker? Celeste or Teresa, I'm not familiar with that sticker. Is that one?
Is it possible for, I've never seen the green global warming sticker. What you might have to do is contact us through email and send us a copy of it, and we can identify it that way and help you research where you get those.
Thanks, Teresa. Next question in the Q&A. What is the timeline for CARB getting caught up on TRU labels they have not shipped yet? Recommend reverting back to existing ARB numbers for simplicity and cost effectiveness. Thanks for the question and comment. Celeste or Teresa?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that one. So we did receive the remaining 2026 labels, and we shipped those out all by the end of June. We're still waiting for the 27-28 shipments. We soon expect to receive those in the next 2 weeks. So as soon as we receive those, we'll be shipping those out also.
Thanks, Teresa. And I think that answers the next question as well, which was also on the timeline for sending out the TRU labels. Let's see. Last question I see in the Q&A from Andrew. If we had already been approved for TRU extensions due to technology delay, can I assume this all is now void and can ignore?
Yes, so since we're no longer transitioning the truck TRUs to zero emissions, the extensions are no longer needed.
Thanks, Teresa. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands or questions or comments in the Q&A. So thank you everyone for participating. If you have any remaining questions or comments on this implementation update, if there is extra time during the last discussion session, we can try to take them at that time. Okay, now passing it back to you, Maria.
Okay. Now I want to share what is happening with the next TRU rulemaking. In case anyone here is not familiar with our work to date, the team was developing regulatory concepts for taking all the non-truck TRUs to zero emission. We were calling this effort TRU Part 2, and we're planning to bring a proposal to the board by 2026 to help meet our state implementation plan goals. The reason Part 2 was only going to address non-truck TRUs was because the original concepts for the 2022 amendments had a zero emission requirement for non-truck TRUs while stationary, but CARB decided to bifurcate the TRU rulemaking. The decision was made because the governor issued Executive Order N7920, which calls for 100% zero-emission off-road vehicles and equipment by 2035. This slide recaps what we consider non-truck TRUs, which includes the trailer TRUs, domestic shipping container TRUs, rail car TRUs, and TRU generator sets. We want to highlight that our goal for Part 2 continues to be zero-emission TRUs, and we are now planning to develop a more comprehensive rule that includes all TRU types, including truck TRUs. What that will look like is still something we are working to determine. In addition to adding truck TRUs, there will be changes to the zero-emission transition concept that we shared last year. But at this time, we do not have any further details to share on that. If you're interested in reviewing our original concepts, please visit our meetings and workshops page. The PowerPoints from November 2023 and May 2024 with this information are still posted. With a more comprehensive regulation and development, we have a new goal of 2029 for board consideration, but is still subject to change. Because we are now considering the truck TRUs for Part 2, we are gathering information on truck TRU operations and zero-emission technologies. If you're interested in sharing information with us on these topics, let us know. Contact information will be shown shortly. Since the last workshop, the team has continued work on how to further reduce emissions from TRUs to support the next rulemaking, including tracking the latest developments with technology, infrastructure, and other improvements in areas of consideration such as insulation, refrigeration, and weight. We have also continued to conduct stakeholder and community outreach. We mentioned collecting truck TRU information, but we are still interested in any news and information on the non-truck TRUs and continuing to conduct site visits as we plan to continue updating the regulatory concepts as well. If you have a facility you want us to visit, let us know at our freight email, which we will share on the next slide. For community work, we are considering options for environmental justice tours in the future. If you are interested in hosting, please also reach out. For Part 2, we are actively shaping the future efforts to further reduce emissions from TRUs and will continue refining our concepts and analysis. Updates will be posted on our webpage as they become available. If you have any additional comments or info to share with us after this workshop, feel free to reach out to us anytime. Our contact info is on this slide. If you have implementation questions, please reach out to our Arbor email at arbor.arb.ca.gov. If you have rulemaking questions, please reach out to our freight email. The next few slides summarize helpful resources related to the implementation of the 2022 TRU amendments and incentive funding opportunities. The first link is the TRU program webpage, where you can subscribe to our listserv to receive the latest news and updates on TRUs. This page also provides compliance information, future rulemakings, and several frequently asked questions documents, including one specific to the US EPA action. The second link is the TRU incentives webpage, where you can learn more about available incentives for zero-emission TRUs and supporting infrastructure. The final link is for TruckStop, which offers various truck-related resources that may also impact TRU fleets, including information on the Advanced Clean Fleet (ACF) regulation and Clean Truck Check (HDIM). Again, we also encourage you to stay in contact with us. For any implementation questions, please reach out using the Arbor helpline.
Thank you, Maria. That brings us to our second discussion session. So we'll pause here for a few minutes for any questions or comments about the TRU Part 2 update that Maria just presented. If you have any remaining questions about Part 1, we will try to circle back at our last discussion session if there is time. I don't see any raised hands, so I will go to the Q&A. There's a question that reads, for zero-emission truck TRUs that use battery electric systems, Would hydrogen or RNG used to generate the electricity for charging those batteries be eligible for LCFS credits? Alyssa, can you respond to that, please?
Hi. Yes, thank you for that question. So LCFS really isn't our program's area of expertise, and we definitely don't want to provide you wrong information. So I think it would be best if you're able to share your contact information. We could get you connected to the LCFS team who can make sure they get you an accurate answer to your question. So I guess my contact information is on one of the future slides. So feel free to reach out to that email. And I guess just to say it, it's alyssa.rhodes@arb.ca.gov.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Oh, sorry, actually, can I add, we were able to pull up the LCFS team's phone number. So if the person that asked that question, if you have a pen or can type it real quickly, just to share it real quickly, that number is 916-282-6249. And just to repeat it, it's 916-282-6249. Oh, and I see your email that you just posted, so I can also go ahead and send that to you after as well.
Thanks, Alyssa, and thank you for the question. I just wanted to quickly remind you, if you are on the phone, you can raise your hand using #2 if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Still not seeing any raised hands at the time. I do see a new question in the Q&A. Are there still TRU 7-year compliance dates, or is compliance now infinite? Sorry, Celeste or Teresa, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So depending on your TRU engine model year, for non-truck TRUs, if your engine model year is 2022 and older, then you're still subject to the 7 years if you don't meet the TRU. And then if your engine model year is 23 and newer, then you're automatically have to be TRU from the manufacturer.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands or questions or comments in the Q&A. So at this time, we will now move on to our baseline inventory discussion. Liz, I will pass it to you now.
Liz and I will be going over the TRU emissions inventory slides. So we've already gotten some background on what a TRU is and why they're important. So I'm going to skip over the first 2 bullet points, and I want to bring your attention to the last bullet point on the slide. So most TRUs and TRU generator sets run on diesel, which create pollutants like diesel particulate matter, referred to as PM, and oxides of nitrogen, referred to as NOx. And this can have significant health impacts, particularly when many TRUs are running at the same location, like a food distribution facility. And we have a picture of a facility like that at the lower right of the slide. Next slide, please. So what is an emissions inventory? An emissions inventory accounts for population or number of TRUs being used, activity or how many hours per year the engine runs, model year or age of the engine, rated power or the size of the engines used, load factor or how hard the equipment is run on average, and emission factor or the average emissions per unit work of the engine. These variables can be used to determine the total annual emissions from all equipment for a given region and year. And in the following slides, we're going to go into each one of these categories. Next slide, please. So before we do that, we do have a few updates we want to cover. The current TRU emissions inventory was last updated to include the 2022 amendments, referred to as the 2021 emissions inventory, to the TRU air toxic control measure in 2022. Updates broadly include emission factors from in-use testing, newer certification data, TRU registration data, updated growth forecasts, and improved fleet level specificity. Next slide. So we're going to talk about the categories we have in our inventory. We have them broken out into 5 categories. We have trailer TRUs, which are the most common TRU type, and they are attached to trailers and generally pulled by semi-trucks, and these are pictured to the right. We have TRU generator sets, which provide power to a non-integrated refrigeration unit. We have truck TRUs, which are used to cool single-body trucks, generally used on shorter routes. Railcar TRUs, which supply refrigeration to refrigerated boxcars pulled by locomotives, and domestic shipping containers, referred to as DSC. And these are TRUs that refrigerate a shipping container and are often intermodal. Along with those 5 categories, we have also broken out the trailer TRUs and the TRU generator sets into in-state and out-of-state. And in-state refers to companies that are registered in California, and out-of-state refers to companies that are registered outside of California. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's some background on population. We got our data from the Air Resources Board Equipment Registration Program, referred to as ARBOR, which is an online registration program for TRUs used in California. And we have a picture of what that website looks like pictured below. And we use the new draft TRU emissions inventory uses a January 2024 ARBOR pool. The 2021 emissions inventory expanded reporting requirements to newly require reporting of out-of-state TRUs. So for the first annual reporting deadline, it was December 31st, 2023 for those out-of-state TRUs. And in previous inventories, we did have to do an estimate for that. And we estimated about 131,200 out-of-state trailer TRUs based on trucking patterns. And in our January 2024 ARBOR data, it showed 141,500 out-of-state trailer TRUs. So not a significant difference, but now that we have this data in ARBOR, we no longer need to make these adjustments, and we just use the data directly from ARBOR. Next slide, please. So here's a breakdown of how we determine what was considered in-state and what was considered out-of-state. So TRUs and generator sets are owned by a mix of California-based companies that primarily operate in-state and out-of-state companies that visit California. And we use the ARBOR registration company address to determine this in-state versus out-of-state designation. ARBOR also provided home state of trailer registration. And just to do a comparison, we did take a look at DMV data to see how they registered in-state and out-of-state designations. And when we did a comparison, we found that there was less than a 2% difference between the way that we were categorizing in-state and out-of-state in ARBOR and how the DMV was doing it. So we continue to use the ARBOR registration company address as our designation. Truck TRUs are modeled as in-state due to shorter routes, and railcar and DSCs are modeled as primarily out-of-state due to use on longer freight corridors. And we have a picture of those freight corridors in California on the left. Next slide, please. So here's a breakdown of the 2024 population by equipment type. The biggest category was out-of-state trailers, followed by in-state trailers, followed by out-of-state generator sets, in-state generator sets, DSC, truck, and last but not least, railcar. And the table on the left shows that breakdown by TRU type. Next slide, please. And here is the population age distribution. So each equipment type has a different age distribution, with out-of-state fleets of trailer TRUs and generator sets generally younger on average than in-state fleets. And you can see that in the chart to the left. We have the percent of the population on the y-axis and the age on the x-axis. And out-of-state trailers are represented by the green line. And as you can see, they peak pretty young at around 2 to 3 years of age. And the in-state trailers are in yellow. And as you can see, they peak at an older age, around 11 or 12. And we further have this broken out by each category, by each equipment type in the chart to the right. Next slide, please. We also took a look at the population by age and compliance status, and we found that 18% of all registered TRUs are not compliant with the TRU ATCM. The inventory does exclude a small number of TRUs from Arbor that were age 28 or older, and we did that based on data from CARB's enforcement program, which showed these older TRUs were likely not in service. And this chart here shows population versus age. And we have the compliant TRUs in green and the non-compliant TRUs in yellow. And as you can see, as the TRUs get older, they start to fall out of compliance. Next slide, please. All right, moving right along to activity. We have no planned changes from previous inventory. The activity data is based on surveys of facilities and telematics data. All trailer TRUs, generator sets, railcar, and DSC are from a 2018 telematics data and 2011 facility survey data with weighted averages, and truck TRUs are based on a 2011 facility survey data. And this table below shows the breakdown of how we got our activity. So we have our data source in the leftmost column, followed by cumulative TRU time represented. The next column is TRU units represented. So we had over 6,000 trailers and just under 500 trucks. We then got our average annual hours, and then we did a weighted average and we got our final number in the rightmost column. Next slide, please.
Hey Liz, just real quickly to pop on, not to interrupt dear Fluff, we could just slow down a little bit for the translators so they can keep up. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so once we got our activity, we had to figure out what portion of that was in state. So the draft inventory carries forward existing methodology that adopts in-state operation fraction to MFAC data for trucks. Operation fraction comes from International Registration Plan, or IRP data, which provides information on where trucks drive. So this table below shows the category, the annual activity inside and outside of California, so the total activity, the IRP data, which is the portion inside California, and the very rightmost column shows the average annual activity inside of California. Next slide, please. All right, moving along to engine rated power. The engine rated power is based on each engine model reported in Arbor and the manufacturer's rated horsepower for each model. So the only thing I really want to highlight in this table to the right, it's broken out in the 5 categories, and then we have it broken out by HP bin. We have below 23 HP, 23 to 25 HP, and 25 HP and over. Next slide, please. And here is our load factor. We have no changes since the 2021 emissions inventory. Our load factors were based on certification cycle data, which was previously corroborated with telematics data. We did see some efficiency improvements in trailer TRUs over 25 HP, which resulted in reduced load factors for model years 2013 and newer. And the one thing I want to highlight in the table to the right is that we do have that final HP category of over 25 HP split out into 2012 and older and 2013 and newer. Next slide, please. Right, here are our emission factors. So emission factors represent the average amount of pollutant per hour for each brake horsepower. Previous inventories used engine certification data from manufacturers measured in laboratory conditions, not during real-world operation. New draft inventory uses NOx emission factors measured from in-use operation of TRUs. PM, hydrocarbons, or HC, and reactive organic gases, or ROG, continue to use certification data as it remains the best available source for those pollutants. Next slide, please. So here is the in-use emissions testing of TRUs using portable emission measurement systems, or PEMS. So CARB ran an in-house emissions testing program from 2020 through 2024 at the Depot Park facility in Sacramento, California. Test modes included cycle sentry and continuous flow, both with the door open and closed. Each test was 1 hour, repeated 3 times. 12 TRUs tested spanning model year 2012 through 2022. Next slide, please. All right, so this is quite a complicated chart, so I'll be walking us through it. This is the TRU NOx emission testing results. And we have our NOx emission factors in grams per brake horsepower hour on the y-axis, and we have the TRUs by model year and manufacturer on the x-axis. We have it further broken out in the 0 to 25 horsepower TRUs in the leftmost side. It's the first 5 columns, and 25 to 50 horsepower for the last 7 remaining columns on the rightmost side. So each green bar represents an in-use PEMS measurement, and the red line is the emission factor used in the draft new inventory, which is an average of the bars you see on the chart. I do want to bring your attention to the yellow line, which is the previous TRU inventory. And as you can see, for 0 to 25 horsepower, the draft new inventory is about 9% lower than what was used in the previous TRU inventory. And for 25 to 50 horsepower, it's about 19% higher than what we used previously. And the blue line you see on the chart is the emission standard. Next slide, please. And here is a 1 hour TRU test, which is showing high NOx period. So this chart is showing NOx versus time in seconds, which is showing a 1 hour over that time. And as you can see, the NOx emissions widely fluctuated during tests that CARB staff used an average. Some TRUs had higher NOx emissions toward the end of the 1 hour test, and it's something we want to take into consideration that the average results could have been higher if testing continued for a longer period. Next slide. All right, so getting into the certification data, for PM, HC, and ROG emission factors, CARB staff continued to use engine certification data. Each engine manufacturer must test engines following a specific engine cycle and report the results to both the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and CARB. CARB staff used Arbor data to determine engine families. The draft new TRU inventory incorporates additional certification data for model years 2020 through 2024 engines. Population of engine families in Arbor were used to weigh emission factors. Next slide. So here are the PM emission factors for trailers under 25 horsepower. And in the chart to the right, we have our PM emission factors versus model year. And the 2021 emissions inventory set a standard of 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour, which aligns with the 25 to 50 horsepower emission standard. And that is represented by the yellow line, the green dots on the chart to the right. Inventory is using certification data up to and including model year 2022, and that is represented by the green lines, the green line. And once we hit model year 2023 and later, we do start using the 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour PM standard. And the blue line is the PM emission standard for under 25 HP engines. Next slide. Here are the PM emission factors for 25 to 50 horsepower. Certification data is lower than the certification standards for TRUs over 25 horsepower. So certification data from 2020 through 2024 showed an average of 0.01 grams per brake horsepower hour compared to the standard of 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour. And so on the chart to the right, we have our 25 to 50 HP certification data represented in green. And we have the 25 to 50 HP emission forecast represented by the yellow line with green dots. And the blue line is the 25 to 50 HP emission standard. Next slide. All right, moving right along to growth. For growth in our inventory, we base it on the California population growth, which is represented in the chart to the right, which shows an increased demand for frozen goods in California, and agricultural production, which would be showing an increased supply of frozen goods to transport out of state. Current growth projection comes from California's 2022 population projection from the California Department of Finance. And the total growth from 2023 through 2050 is about 1% or 0.3% annually. And so as you can see on the chart to the right, we have our California human population versus calendar year, and it does dip a little bit and then flattens out. And that's where we got our California population information from. Next slide. And this is the County Agricultural Commissioner's data reports that the total acreage of California's farms have been relatively flat from 2002 through 2018, suggesting little change in amount of goods. So the chart to the right shows the total acreage versus the calendar year, and it's further broken out into different types of crops. But what I do want to draw your attention to is that red line at the very top, which is the total harvested acreage. And as you can see, it remains relatively flat. So as a result of these two data sources, the TRU population and activity forecast projects zero growth. Staff is still investigating data sources and we are open to input. Next slide. This slide is a comparison of the 2021 emissions inventory growth versus the 2025 emissions inventory growth. The previous emission inventory showed a 1.6% annual growth based on economic forecasts of the frozen goods sector. The draft new inventory has no growth applied based on the population and production metrics. The difference between inventories is based on the previous inventory using an economic forecast, which can reflect an increase in prices, versus consumption or volume method, which is not showing similar growth. And the chart below shows the comparison. So we have growth relative to 2024 versus calendar year. And the green line represents the 2021 TRU emissions inventory growth, and the yellow line represents the 2025 TRU emissions inventory growth. And as you can see, the green line is going up while the yellow line remains flat. Next slide. Okay, so now we're moving on to forecasting equipment replacement. Population turnover is the process of forecasting the age of equipment to better understand future emissions. The TRU forecast is from base year 2024 to 2050. Future year equipment is projected by fleet age distribution observed in base year 2024. Each TRU fleet is modeled individually. Fleets with many newer TRUs turn over quickly to newer equipment, staying relatively new. Fleets with older equipment purchase less often and may purchase used TRUs. Next slide. So here's a further breakdown of our turnover methodology. First, we identify the average age in each individual fleet. We then, oh, sorry, can you go back? Thank you. We then, next slide. All right, so I'll just start over with this one. We first identify the average age in each individual fleet. We then identify the minimum age within each individual fleet. Turnover then occurs when the average age of the fleet is exceeded. The new equipment is based on the minimum age within each fleet. If a fleet buys used equipment, the new equipment will turn over to the minimum age within the fleet. Next slide. Okay, so here's an example of turnover. This is a fleet with 5 TRUs with a 12-year-old average age and a 7-year-old minimum age in the base year. And our leftmost column is the calendar year, starting with base year 2024. The following 5 columns are our fleet, so the 5 TRUs of various ages. And the next column is the average age before turnover, which in our base year is 12. And the rightmost column is the average age after turnover, which we haven't had turnover yet, so there is nothing in that one yet. So we start with our base year 2024, and we age every TRU up by 1 year when we turn over to year 2025. We then take our average age, and our average age before turnover is now 13, which exceeds the average age in the base year, which was 12. So that triggers the model to take a look at the oldest equipment, which in this case is age 17. We do have 2 TRUs that are age 17, so the model picks one and turns that over to the minimum age in the base year, which was age 7. So now when we take our average age with this new turned over TRU, we have an average age of 11, which means that we are now good to go and can turn over to the next calendar year of 2026. And in this year, we see that our average age is 12. It doesn't exceed our base year, so no turnover needs to happen in that year. And so on and so forth until we reach calendar year 2050. Next slide. All right, so we finally made it to our results, starting with population. We have the population on the y-axis and calendar year on the x-axis, and we have it further broken out into our diesel tiers, starting with tier 0, which is so tiny you actually can't see it on this chart. Tier 1, which is all the way to the leftmost column, it's not column, excuse me, to the left of the chart, which you still can't see too well. Tier 2, which is in orange. And we actually don't have tier 3 TRUs, but I did keep it in the legend just to acknowledge that. We then have our tier 4 interim, which is represented by the blue bars, and tier 4 final, which is represented by the green diagonal lines. And we have our TRUs turning over to tier 4 final in calendar year 2034. Next slide. And here are our results for NOx. So we have NOx in tons per day on the y-axis, calendar year on the x-axis. It is once again broken out into the different diesel tiers, and our one new piece of information on this slide is the black line, which is the 2021 emissions inventory. And as you can see, we do have an increase in emissions, and that is due to taking into account the non-compliant TRUs for this updated inventory. In the previous inventory, we did not take those into account, but we do have updated data from enforcement that a lot of the times their stops were showing that TRUs were non-compliant, so we did keep those in for this inventory update. Next slide. And these are the results for PM 2.5. We have PM 2.5 in tons per day on the y-axis, calendar year on the x-axis, broken out into the same diesel tiers. And we have the 2021 emissions inventory represented in the black line. And you're seeing the same pattern as you saw in NOx. There is an increase in tons per day, and that is due to the same reasons that we are now taking into account the non-compliant TRUs. So we are seeing an increase in emissions. And before I turn it over to the discussion portion of the presentation, I did have 2 questions to pose to the audience. So question 1 is, we are interested in the effects of seasons on TRUs. We know that they will work harder in the summer versus the winter. So if anyone in the audience has any data on activity, fuel use, or how long cooldowns take in different seasons, please reach out to us, and I believe our contact info will be up in a later slide. And our second question is, we are also interested in learning more about genset usage, and we've heard from companies that gensets run 24/7 and don't have any communication with the TRU. So if that is the case, our activity data may be too low for gensets, and we are interested in learning more. So if anyone has information about genset activity, please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So we are now at our third and final discussion session. This one is focused on the inventory that Liz just presented. We can circle back to any TRU ATCM implementation or TRU rulemaking questions and comments if there is extra time. Like before, we will start with verbal comments and questions. Then we'll move to any that we receive in the Q&A. If you can, please remember to start by stating your name and affiliation. And again, as a reminder, you can raise your hand on the phone by pressing #2. Okay, I see one raised hand from, I believe it's Evan. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you. My name's Evan Kuzo. I'm with Sonoma Tech. Which emissions inventory currently online is the most accurate to estimate TRU emissions through the 2030s?
So this presentation is up online, and we will be posting the documentation and updating the online query tool in the next few weeks. So this is the most recent 2025 inventory.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Evan, for the question. Okay, oh, there's one more raised hand. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Then you can ask your question or make your comment.
Oh, hi, good afternoon. I'm Sing Lee from South Coast, and I have just a quick question. First of all, good presentation, thank you. And then my question is, this 2025 updated inventory is going to be included in next version of CPAM or not? So I understand the CARB is preparing next version of CPAM. I don't know the exact timeline, but supposedly incorporate the new updates since the development of currently available version. So is your plan to include these updates in the next CPAM?
Yes, we will be including these updates in the next CPAM.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more raised hands, so we will move to the Q&A. First question from Carrie. Oh, sorry, I think that question was maybe asked verbally. Okay, second question. Will a copy of this presentation be available online? So the slide deck is already posted online and available on CARB's TRU meetings and workshop webpage. The recording of this presentation will also be available on that same webpage, and I can type out the link to that in the Q&A for you. Okay, next question. Can you include in the activity category the amount of time spent stationary? This can help determine the amount of emissions while the trailer is stationary. This can help make the case for eTRU using shore power rather than diesel. Liz or Corey, can you respond to that, please?
Sure, I can respond. We are interested in that kind of activity data. We just currently don't have a very good source for it. So if anyone has further information on stationary versus not stationary, we would definitely be interested. Please reach out to us. I don't know if Corey has anything to add on that.
I think that covers it, Liz. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. It appears that previous TRU surveys did not collect detailed information on the share of TRU activity related to transporting agricultural products. Could you point me to any sources or data that estimate what portion of TRU operations are associated with transporting raw or processed agricultural goods, and how this is considered in compliance planning or regulatory targets? Liz or Corey, is that something you can respond to?
For sure. This is a good question. My name is Corey Palmer, manager of the inventory section, off-road inventories at CARB. So TRUs don't report exactly, what they're transporting over the year. Instead, we can look at things like commodity flow forecasts and current surveys. The freight analysis framework is one that gives us things like tonnages of goods moved, like frozen products that would come from agriculture versus the other uses like pharmaceuticals or floriculture or other things like that. So we don't specifically break out in the inventory what percent is assigned to what industry. When we were looking at growth, we looked across the different types of things that TRUs move, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, and floriculture, and we found that they were all essentially flat by volume. Some of them are growing in value. So that's how it's used. We look at the different things that TRUs are transporting, moving, and we found that because those are flat, we're not forecasting any growth in overall TRU activity. How that's used is just forecasting future emissions from which planning and regulatory decisions are made from. So when we look out at like 2040, 2050, we can see what do we project the total activity and therefore emissions are going to be. That's how we use growth and why we look at the different commodities that TRUs move. And then, yeah, I think the next question ties into it. I would just agree that looking at total pounds or tonnage of commodities moved is probably more useful than acreage, just because that's going to tie more closely to activity. And so if you're interested in the sources we were looking at, I'd be happy to share them. They're just, total tons of commodities moved and then forecast out into the future. That's done by the Federal Highway Administration. So we'd be happy to share that info. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. Let's see. Okay, next question. Do you have any plans or mechanisms in place to differentiate between conventional diesel and renewable or biodiesel usage? Is that a question Liz or Corey can respond to?
Sure.
Yes, I'm going to bounce this one to Corey.
Okay. Yeah, we are monitoring that across California. Again, without specific reporting from TRUs, I don't think that we have a great metric to track it just for TRUs. But California is tracking through the Low Carbon Fuel Standard programs, LCFS, the total blend of fuel that is biodiesel and renewable, and we do reflect in the inventories those percentages being in place across different diesel categories, the on-road trucks, all the off-road categories, including TRUs. So we do look at that closely. It's not specific to TRUs, but it does reflect the entire California fuel market. And
thanks, Corey. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Next question is, how can the black 2021 EI line change over time? It should be a reference point. I assume this is in reference to one of the slides just presented.
Yeah, if this is referencing the comparison to the previous inventory, which is the black lines on the NOx and PM result charts, it's just showing the change over the calendar year. I don't fully understand this question. If they want to elaborate, or if Corey maybe has a better understanding and wants to add on.
Yeah, any clarification would help. I would just say maybe the 2021 EI line, what it means is, so when we do an inventory, we also forecast. So the 2021 emissions inventory, like Liz said, isn't just referring to the calendar year 2021. It was a forecast that was done in 2021 out to 2050, and that's the black line. So it's just saying we have updated better data now in 2025. This is our new forecast and how it compares with the previous 2021 forecasted inventory. I think that might be it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thanks, Liz and Corey. Let's see, next question. Do battery electric engines have a family number? I don't know if you, Liz or Corey, are familiar with that. Probably haven't seen too many TRU battery electric engines.
I don't know. We could follow up on this, or if anyone else on the call wants to chime in. I believe any engine certified through EPA or CARB get a family number, but I don't think that applies to the battery ones. So I'm seeing in chat that the battery electric engines are not considered engines and therefore don't have an engine family number the same way that diesel ones would. Thank you, Sam Tomasa.
Okay, next question. What opportunities do you see for replacing diesel generators with cleaner alternatives in TRU applications? Alyssa or Jerry, could you respond to that, perhaps?
Yeah, I can take that one, and then Jerry, if you want to add anything. So I guess the short answer is technically everywhere, and then the longer answer is that CARB in general is working towards replacing diesel equipment with zero emission per the governor's order that Maria had talked about earlier today. But with that said, we are also considering pathways to get to zero emission that includes those cleaner technologies and solutions. So I guess just to plug here, if anyone does have any technology solutions that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to set up time to talk to you about them.
Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, next question. Confirming truck TRU compliance for 2015 through 2021 models. They do or do not have the 7-year age out. I think that's a compliance question. Maybe Teresa or Celeste, can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, I can respond to that one. So truck TRUs 2015 and newer, they don't follow the in-use compliance standard, so those will remain compliant until a more stringent standard is adopted. So we're in the process of updating them, the units that are registered currently in Arbor to reflect that.
Thanks, Teresa. Okay, next question from Steve. Is CARB going to start to promote shore power or promote more aggressively as a means to reduce PM and NOx emissions? Alyssa, can you respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So CARB is technology neutral, which means that we don't favor any of the technologies or solutions above any of the others. But that said, as I mentioned, we are considering all our options to get us to cleaner equipment and to zero emission. So it's not to say that shore power couldn't be a solution to get there. So I guess the short answer is that we are considering it among other solutions.
Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks, Steve, for the question. Next question, can you clarify what year data was used until 2024 or 2021? I assume this is in reference to the data used in the emissions inventory. Liz or Corey, is that something you can respond to?
Sure. So the base year data for the updated inventory is 2024. I think maybe there is some confusion since we did refer to the 2021 inventory. That is just comparing it to the previous inventory. So the data used for this update is from base year 2024.
Thanks, Liz. I see one last question in the Q&A. Oh, if it's about TRU technologies, you can contact our freight email. That would be freight@arb.ca.gov. And I think that's coming up on the next slide in case you didn't catch that. Oh, thanks. I see Jerry, my colleague, typing out that email, I believe. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands, and I think we've covered all of the questions and comments in the Q&A. So I will pass it back to Maria now.
Thanks, Lorenzo, and thank you everyone for your input and participation in today's discussions. Before we conclude our workshop, as a quick reminder, we're actively working on TRU Part 2, so if you have any information to share with us, we are happy to consider it as we continue moving forward. Once we have updates, we will share them on our listserv, so if you're not already subscribed, we suggest signing up. You can find the link to the listserv to sign up on our TRU program webpage that we showed earlier on slide 21. If anyone does have any remaining questions or comments that we did not get to about the inventory, you can reach out to Liz. Her email address is on the slide. If you have any remaining questions or comments about the implementation of the 2022 amendments, contact arbor at arb.ca.gov. For info or questions on the next TRU rule, the email is freight@arb.ca.gov. That concludes our workshop. Thank you everyone for attending. We will see you next time.